Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to continue the interactive dashboard in Excel part 2. We saw how to create the KPI dashboards and how to link that to the slicer to make it interactive. In this part 2, we are going to learn further more on how to add the graphs and make it more interactive. In this video, we are going to add some more charts to the dashboard to provide the complete insight of the overall output. Let's move on to our dashboard now. In our previous part, we learned how to create the KPI cards like this, how to connect these KPI cards to the main data that we have from pivot, and how to add slicer to make this KPI card data highly interactive. Now we are going to continue with our next part of the dashboard. Let me go to pivot data again. Let me remove this because we already have it in our dashboard. Let me keep the month data as I need it for some other reference. And when you click on the slicer, right click and report connection. It is connecting to the pivot table. Click OK. And the same goes with this other slicer as well. Even this is connected to pivot data, and that is the reason it's now highly interactive. And when I click on the data, it picks only the data which is selected and shows only that values in our KPI cards here. On this dashboard page, let me add another shape. Go to Insert, Shapes, and let me select this rectangle and place the shape here to cover the whole view, and change the color to light or light color. This is a semi-transparent style, and I'm going to send this backward. Send to back. And let me remove the outline for this. No outline. Here in this pivot table, I only plotted the data for the overall years. For us to plot the graph, we need to apply the data for monthly, weekly, and the yearly wise data. For that, I will have to apply another pivot table in the same place. Let me go to the main sheet where I have all these data and select the whole range, which is already selected here. Insert, pivot table, and new worksheet. You can select the new worksheet or existing worksheet and go to the same pivot data and select the range here. Click OK. Now I need my date here and the same sum of calls offered, calls answered. Let me select only these two columns and go to pivot chart here. We see we already have one recommended chart, which is the clustered column chart. Click OK. Let me place this aside and right click on this and hide all the feed buttons because I don't need all these buttons here. Now all the buttons are removed. I have the data for sum of calls answered, calls offered, abandoned, and abandoned percentage. I don't need abandoned calls and abandoned percentage for this chart. So let me remove this from the pivot. I now have only calls answered and calls offered for these years. I can remove the grid lines. I have now entered the chart title as yearly calls offered and calls answered, as this is the calls offered and calls answered data for these 4 years. I've changed the chart design to black background. Now I have enabled the glow preset to blue, and that's what the glow that we see outside the chart. Now let me cut this and place it on our dashboard sheet. Now I have one of my chart ready. I have a month slicer here. Let me cut this and paste it here. Let me go to the slicer settings. Click on slicer settings, and I don't need the display header here, and hide the values with no data. And here let me make the column as 12 because we have 12 months. I'm going to just stretch this across. Now we have it like a button shape. Let me give a different format to this. I can just make it a little more big, no problem. Let me format the slicer. Go to slicer styles and click on new style. Select items with data, format, fill with dark blue, and font, let me make it as white and bold. And also I can just give the size. And unselected items with data, format, and I'm going to give it as green with the same font, bold and 10. And hover the selected items with data because we have items for only data. Let me just give this color. And now even after making the changes, I don't see any changes on the slicer. The reason is that we have to select this custom slicer. Now we see that this is customized, and I have unchecked it. It means that this is not selected. So when it is not selected, it will turn to green. And those which are selected, this will remain blue. And when I hover the mouse, it turns yellow. These were the formatting settings that I just changed, and this is applied here now. And now it's selected, so it turned out into blue. This way we can have our slicer, and depending upon the month, we can just make the changes to the data. Now when I click on July, the number is still reduced. Now when I click on August, I see that the numbers are reducing here, but no changes happening in this chart. When I click on 2020 only, we have only 6 months data, so this is only showing till June, but I don't see any changes here in this particular chart. That's because none of these slicers are connected to this pivot. As we see that we have two pivots, this one and this one. We have the KPIs connected to this pivot, and we have the chart connected to this pivot. The slicers are connected only to pivot 1 and not to pivot 2. To connect the slicers to all the pivots, go to report connection or right click on the slicer, report connection, and select both the pivot. You can do the same thing to this pivot as well. Connect it to both the pivot and here as well. Now all the three slices are connected to both the pivots. Let me select the data for 2017, and this is only showing for 2017. Now this is selecting only for one. Let me right click and select multi-select. And now when I select it, we have 2017 and 2018 data enabled, and excluding June, July and August because we have excluded these. Let me include this as well. So now we have all our months included. And now when I select 2019, we have 3 data here, and 2020 brings all the 4 bars here. And this is for yearly calls offer or calls answer data. We can check for the yearly calls, or we have the overall 4 years calls or 3.5 years data, so we can have an overview of this. We can even check the quarterly data by just clicking on quarter 1 of all these years, quarter 2 data, Quarter 1 data is shown even in the KPIs, where for quarter 1 for all the months it's this, and the total abandoned percentage was 3%, and average calls offered was 505 per day for quarter 1, and this is for all 4 years. And when you select only for quarter 2, the total calls offered were 495 calls per day. And here the multi-select is disabled, so let me click on multi-select again, and now I can select quarter 1 and 2 together. And for quarter 1 and 2 average, this is the calls offered every day on average, and this is the abandoned percentage. And we have even the months increasing here. For quarter 1 we just had 3 months, and for quarter 1 and 2 we have 6 months now. This way all our KPIs and pivot tables and the pivot charts are highly interactive and it's dynamic now. The next chart that we are going to show here is the call flow chart for daily basis. To do that, let me go to the data again and insert another pivot, because we cannot make any change to the existing pivot now. Let me go to the existing worksheet, new pivot here. The reason I'm inserting new pivot is all these are connected to one chart, and if I make any changes to these data, the chart design and the chart data will be disturbed. For us to have multiple charts, we need to have multiple pivot data. On this new pivot table, let me drag the days and the calls answered. Let me select only the calls answered data for this. This is the calls answered every day, and for all the 4 years data, the first of every day was this much call. This is the sum of all the answered calls, but I need the average daily calls. So let me select average here. So this will give me an average percentage or average numbers of everyday call, and this is the data that I want to show graphically. Now select this range, exclude the grand total, and go to pivot chart, go to line chart or area chart. Let me select the area chart for now and just select the chart data. Right click on this and hide all these buttons. In my data, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as the number, but here the 2 is missed. It's skipping 1 in between. It's just to resize the value. Let me remove the legend for this and rename the chart title as average call per day. Okay, this is the calls per day data that I have, and let me change the design of the chart. Let me remove the grid lines and let me change the background of this chart to a dark blue, and let me fill this chart, and here these data, let me give a different color to this, which is white, so that it just gets highlighted, and make it bold by just pressing Ctrl B. You can just expand it a bit if you want it to be much more in detail, and go to format data series, and you can select the glow option here like the way we did for the other chart. Let me select the glow as blue here for this chart as well, or we can select the yellow one. Here I've selected the glow for the outlook, and let me reduce the transparency of this and the glow preset to this one. Let me select the same glow preset to the outside one. Let me select green to the outside preset. So now we have the outside chart with the 3D glow. And also let me underline this whole thing. Control U to underline this. This looks a little okay. So let me just cut this and copy to the dashboard. Let's see if that matches to the color. and adjust this to the other chart height. Okay, I can just get this stretched a little more. Now we have the call data, and this is for all the years and all the months. Now we can just select only the particular month. When I just continuously unselect the months here, I see the changes only in this chart and in the KPI cards. I don't see any changes in this chart. The reason is because these slices are not connected to this pivot, which is this pivot. We'll have to now connect all these slices to this pivot as well. Right click, report connection, and select the third pivot. Now we see the changes here, and we'll have to repeat this for all the charts to make sure that all the charts are connected to the slicers. Now let me just select this back and remove the multi-select option. And now I have only for March, and this is only for March. This is only for 1 quarter data. Let me clear the filter or multi-select to get all the data. So when I click on this, everything gets selected, and if I want to clear this, I can just clear everything and everything gets selected. Now we have the yearly calls offered data and the average calls per day data, and using the graphical representation we are able to clearly understand how the call flow and the call answered is, and how the call structure is or the call flow is for the daily calls. And from this we see that 11th is the highest, and if you have to select only for the years, we can select just this 1 year. And here for 2019, and for all the months we see that 11th was the highest call flow day, and here another day which was on 16th, there was a high call volume, and the least call volume was on 10th. When we select 19th and 20th, we see that the low call volume day was on 19th. We can just go to the year specific data only for 2020, and we can see that the lowest call volume for 2020 on an average was on 17th for all the 6 months. Let me clear all the filter. To do that, right click and clear filter. We have all our data back. Now let me add the funnel chart for understanding the quarterly wise call data. To do that, let me go to the data table, insert a new pivot on the same existing worksheet where we have all our other pivot, and select any range from here. Okay. And let me look for the calls answered data only. Now I have the data for these quarters. Let me select this whole data, go to pivot chart and select the 3D stacked column chart. Okay. Let me remove this field button, go to design and switch the rows or columns. Now we have all the 4 quarter data in one column. Let me remove the grid lines and add a chart title to it. The chart title would be, so now I've mentioned quarterly calls answered, and I can just remove the legends. Click on any of these bar format data series and let me select full pyramid and click on this y-axis, double click, go to axis options and select value in reverse order. Now we have the cone shape data. I can stretch this a bit and remove the axis data here. Let me give a nice color to all these 4 quarter. I've now made these changes and I've given a little different color to the funnels. Let me give the labels to this as quarter 1, 2 and 3. I've now made the changes to the funnel chart and have given the data labels to all these blocks where this is 1, 2, 3 and 4 quarters. Let me give the glow to this chart. Click on it and select the glow which is suitable for this black output. So let me give yellow as the glow output. I'm going to cut this now. Control X and copy it here. Now we have our three charts side by side and we have to connect even this chart to the slicers. So let me right click, report connection and connect the pivot table 5 as well. And here we'll do the same thing, right click, report connection and connect the pivot. And only for 2017, 2018 data also changes, 2019, and for 2020 we have only 2 quarters, and that's the reason it's showing, even the funnel is showing only the quarter 1 and quarter 2 data, and we have the slicer data also for 6 months. Now 2 years data is selected and we have 2 bars here, average call data and quarter 1, 2, 3 and 4 data is now here for these 2 years. It means that quarter 3 and 4 has received the least calls, but quarter 1 and 2 has always received the highest calls. This is how we can create a dashboard which is very interactive, dynamic, and as and when we change the year data or the monthly data, we see the data accordingly, and this helps us to compare, understand, and see the status of all these parameters day wise, monthly wise, and quarter wise. We can add some more charts to the dashboard as per our requirement. But for now, these three charts can give a clear insight about the calls answered, calls offered, average calls per day, and how the call flow is for the quarterly